In the beginning. Ooh, chuckles. Isn't it interesting, just from the way I said that there can be a different interpretation from just those words than what you might normally say yourself. Which, as you probably guessed from the music and the poetry we've had, we're talking about Midrash. How many were here a couple of weeks ago when Rabbi Sandy Sasso was here and talked a lot about what Midrash is? For those of you who weren't, Mary defined it really well. It's just an interpretation of text. It's really what it's about. And I am so glad to be able to talk about that here, because I don't know any other congregation that would let a bunch of artists come in and take over a couple of worship services. You guys are great, and I really appreciate it. I've shown art here before. I know so many of you before. So it's really great to see a lot of faces that I know. So thank you for letting me come up here. One of the things that the RSA artists have in common with you as a Unitarian congregation is that we're from all kinds of different, the whole spectrum of different faiths and beliefs. Just from the little over 60 artists that have gone through the program, there's Christians, Jews, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics, Wicca, and Buddhist. Those are the ones I know of. So we come from this, no matter what our faith system might be, we've been able to work together through these ancient texts of Genesis, some of the beginning stories, to create new stories that have to do with contemporary life now. Which is a big thing I want to ask about you now, is I want you to contribute to that. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about being creative. We're talking about being creative with the music and through the poetry. But as you hear some of these stories, and you've looked at the different art, I really want to fill this wall up that says my midrash. That means like you and you and you. And there's not that many of you here, so I'm hoping everybody participates, because I want to take your ideas, I'm going to take your ideas, your questions, your own midrash, not just doesn't have to be on these 5 stories that we've got here, but any other questions, comments, interpretations. There's paper over here, there's pens and different, there's Post-it notes, and there's tape, and there's cards. Fill up this wall over here with some of your thoughts, which means it's okay to get up right now and talk. Just like you could come over here and maybe combine that with lighting the candle too. So don't feel formal. I'm probably going to, if I don't see anybody getting up, I'm going to do something about it. So you can do it voluntarily. Okay, here we go. They've heard enough, they're already going to get started. So I should tell you what the 5 stories are, maybe. So we got it kind of in order here, the way we put the art up here. In this order that we study them, but Rabbi Sasso chose these texts as a way to be able to communicate. So we've got creation through here, then we've got Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the Akedah, which is the binding of Isaac, and Jacob's dreams. Oh, I'll go with you.
Let's do it.
So please, I love that some people are getting up there. Hey, Jerry. See, that's how I'm gonna call him out, because I've known Jerry for a long time. There was one time during a conversation I kind of overheard as Rabbi Sasso was talking to some others, a little comment that she made that the Old Testament is a Rorschach, like everything that's wrong with people. And the New Testament is a guide to how to be perfect. And as John Wesley said, who was the founder of Methodism, he used the word perfection and love. And I got to admit, I just heard that perfection in love last week at my church. I got to tell you, I'm a practicing Christian, and I go to Castleton United Methodist Church, 71st and Shade. A lot of you might know of it because it's famous for its fish fry. Coming up in July. So Pastor Bert Kite does reenactments of John Wesley with the clothes and everything from the 1700s. And I want to bring him up, give him a little shout out, because today is his very last sermon. He's retiring today. He calls me his birthday brother, because his birthday twin, because we were born 4 hours apart, both went to IU. We've kind of lived in the same neighborhood, never really met until a couple of years ago. It's his last sermon and it's my first. Now it's going to remain to be seen whether or not there's going to be a second. So we'll see how that goes. I want to get started off with this whole thing from Genesis with Einstein. I've been a fan of Einstein's for a long time. There's a lot of questions. Some people say, oh, he was atheist. Some people say he was religious. We all know he was a genius when it came to theoretical physics. He said, science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. And I'll kind of leave that at that. I want to get a little Einstein in there. In the late 7th or 6th century BCE was the beginning of two stories among the Jewish people. There wasn't one story, there was two stories. And in around 538 BCE, the Persians defeated the Babylonians. And in this territory was the Jews. And the Persians said, we're going to give you an area to be a little semi-autonomous. But before you can do that, you got to get your act together. And you got to have one code of law. So meanwhile, the Jews have been going around with two different kinds of stories. The first one, this is NIV version I read that you all know from Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then it goes on to talk about 7 more days of different kinds of creation. Now, this comes from the priestly faction who wrote this and was their interpretation of the beginning. Now, if you read on farther, you come to chapter 2. And it had been used as a story by the Yahwistic people. Comes from Yahweh. And this was the landowners. Everybody was this was an agrarian society. So being tied to the land, that was life. So they had their own story. Now, even though it's an older story, when they had to get together and put their stories together, they couldn't really, they argued and it's like, this is what we got to do. So they ended up just putting them together. So we've got two different creation stories. And the second one, the oldest one, goes like this. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. And it goes on a little bit more about seeds and finally getting rain and stuff like that. So we've got a mashup already. The very first story is two different interpretations. Now, I personally have my own in there too, because I'm an artist, but my hobby is science. I love theoretical physics and neurology and astronomy, and I'm really into string theory. Anybody else into physics in here? Come on, I was hoping to see maybe a few more hands. So there's a whole interpretation I can go into very easily, but I'm not going to. I don't have enough time already. But the one thing that was important in setting up this rule of codes is that Genesis affirms monotheism and denies polytheism. That was a first. That was a big deal. Okay, so at this point in time, anybody else feels like getting up there and doing some cards? We got to fill that wall up. See, I'm going to give some more plugs as we go on. I'm not going to let you forget about it. So then we come to Adam and Eve, right there at the beginning of Genesis 2. And man, that could, I don't know how many, we should be able to come up with like a different story and interpretation of Adam and Eve from everybody here. So we got Adam and Eve at the beginning, it was in the beginning of the stories, but the Garden of Eden didn't become part of what became the Torah until about 500 BCE, around that time when they had to put everything together. So you'll still find a difference between the priestly version and the Yahwistic version. And you can tell it by whether or not is it cosmos or is it land-based. Now, the one I know, I think it was Mary who talked about in the introduction of her poem how Midrash became so important to her that she was able to like, whoa, you can interpret stuff? I was brought up in the Methodist Church, and we never talked about personal interpretation. We basically heard a sermon, here's what it means, go and sin no more. And then it was just a couple of weeks ago when Attorney General Sessions quoted the Bible to justify the keeping of the kids. And there was all the backlash about that. I appreciate the groans in here, and I was here 2 weeks ago when right after that happened. So it's important to be able to know some of this stuff, to be able to have your interpretations. And I started to go down that road, and I don't want to go any farther. So in the Yahwistic, chapter 2 version of Genesis, we have the creation of Adam and Eve. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground. See, we got the dust and the ground thing going. Breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Genesis 1, which you usually read before Genesis 2. This is the priestly cosmic version. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, over the livestock, and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image, in the image of God. He created them, male and female, he created them. Now did you catch the part that he created them? Later on, you come back across to the rib. One of the things I've learned from all this studying that we've been done from all these scholars through Butler University is that words really can get misinterpreted over time. I think a lot of you are probably aware of that and have heard some different examples. Rib comes from a root word that really means more like side. But more than side, it's more like part of. Which gets in some of the midrashes that have happened among the rabbis over a long length of time, is that it really means that man and woman were like together. And it wasn't until later that there was a separation that happened. Which is the same thing that happens with the word man. The semantics of man to begin with is more like mankind. Man is us, humanity. We got woman, but there also should be weirman, which comes to like werewolf. Some of when you go back into especially English, since that's what I'm using here, for some reason men got to come along and they dropped that we're part and sort of took man for everything. They was like, we're man, we're everything. So I don't know when that happened, but somewhere along the line, woman kept coming down to us. So really, when you go farther back, when you say man, we're not talking about male. And I think that's really, really important. There's my maybe I should go over and write that down. There's my little midrash there. Okay, I will. I can write down and do this at the same time. Cain and Abel. Man, murder, fratricide. No, I'm not going to write that down at the same time. I can't chew bubble gum and walk. I don't chew gum. I seriously don't. And this gets into this whole, we study these Genesis stories, and they're, along with, other than creation, we've got murder, and then we got coming up human sacrifice, and then a little later we got betrayal and lying. It's like, man, what is going on with everybody? But with Cain and Abel, and I do invite you, I am going to turn the volume up on this. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I had headphones. Nobody was bothering putting headphones on. There was a poem here by Rabbi Sasso that she and I collaborated on independently, where her poem is about Cain and Abel as children. What were they like as kids? And that's an angle you can go with your own midrash. If you, the one example we had, the one good thing we've got about something like Genesis is that whether or not you are a Bible reader or a believer, there's still thousands of generations of sitting around campfires, playing music, philosophizing, looking at the stars, and figuring out what in the world is going on and what is wrong with us. So a lot of these stories about what the Old Testament being about, so much is going wrong with everybody. Everybody's got problems. I don't know, is there anybody in the Bible, I'm thinking in the Old Testament, that's like got it going? I mean, I can't think of anybody. I mean, they've got poor old Job, and Noah had his problems. It's like everybody's got these problems all the time. And that's kind of what was going on with all, it's like there wasn't psychology, but there was definitely observation and knowing what's going on with everybody. How do you explain that? Are you NPR listeners in here? Okay, did you just hear I can't remember what show it was. It was just, I think it was just this couple of days ago or so, that talked about it's amazing that there is good in the world. If you talk about natural selection and survival of the fittest and all that, when people are like, why is everything so bad? Well, from a person who studies human behavior and sociology and all that, the question becomes, why is there any good? So there's something there that leads us to want to be better, and we can recognize what's going wrong with friends and relatives around us that we're like, what can we do about this? How do we recognize it? We just can't, obviously it doesn't work, keep murdering your brothers all the time. So we got to get past that somehow. So this is an area too that it's be real easy to have some of your own interpretations on, and have some creative thought into, as Rabbi Sasso said 2 weeks ago, in the Bible it refers to they had an argument, boom, next thing you know, Abel's dead. So what's with that? And I think it's very important that what was the argument about? Why isn't that said? Well, it's important that was left out. That's where you all come from, is, okay, they had an argument. What do you think they could have been arguing about that would have led to this first killing? There's also the little idea, too, that Cain didn't know what murder was. But there's also this say, well, they were farmers and they raised livestock and they ate them. They knew that if you bashed in a skull that something was going to happen. Let's go on to the binding of Isaac. This is where I could spend too long talking about this, because that was the class my first class that I took, the Akedah. Human sacrifice. Big questions in this story. I'm not going to do I don't want to just read about a bunch of verses, but Abraham and Sarah had a lot of adventures. And all along, Abraham is talking to Sarah. They're having discussions. Whenever God's telling him something to do, he argues about it. But then all of a sudden, God says, go sacrifice Isaac. And he goes, okay. And then it's like the next day he's going up the mountain with the servants and the donkeys and the wood and Isaac. And meanwhile, it's like, whoa, did he tell Sarah anything? What does Sarah know? He always told Sarah stuff. And why didn't he argue with God about sacrificing Isaac? What is going on here? It is a nice piece in the story, the fact that the angel stopped Isaac. Of course, there's some stuff about that too that I won't go into. Did Abraham listen to the angel when he said stop? Some stories say that God didn't stop. He told the angel, you can have God tell me to stop. God's the one that told me to do it. Don't send me somebody else to tell me to stop doing what God told me to do. Some of that's kind of left out, but there are written histories and stories about things like that. More interpretations. There's all kinds of interpretations that circle around these stories. And then next thing you know, Abraham's coming down the mountain with his servants and with the donkeys. Where's Isaac? And in the very next chapter, Sarah's dead. What happened? Come on, give me a break. Let's have a little more of the story here. We're going to jump over here now to Jacob's dreams. Now this is really wild because we got the oldest son. He deserves everything that he's supposed to get, but then we got little Jacob, who is a real mama's boy. She's got her own ideas about she can control him and some of that fortune, and they make Isaac think he's the oldest, gets the blessing, gets the inheritance. Jacob's brother Esau, meanwhile, he was like, okay. He probably knew, he's got to know his brother by then anyway, even though he's been doing this all his life. He's like, whatever. Jacob takes off, has his adventures. He's always, even though he's like this scoundrel, he lies, he betrays, he's still going to God all the time, saying, hey, bless me, God, bless me. And God seems to keep blessing him all the time. I was like, what is going on at that? This guy that is like a real scoundrel, why does he get blessed? I mean, even at the end, he's doing well. He's got his family, and he's got his wife, and his kids, and his army, and his entourage. And God tells him, you got to go make up with Esau. Go. So he takes everybody, and he's going there. But when he gets to the border where his brother was, he told everybody else, it's like, because he thought, oh man, Esau is going to kill me. He is just going to kill me. So he tells everybody else, his family and his army people, he says, you go up, see how they do, I'll follow. So even down at the end, he's still a scoundrel, a real chicken. So I'm saying these words out loud in a way that these are interpretations. I didn't say in the Bible, oh, he's a chicken and he's a mommy's boy. But I can interpret some of what that text is to be able to be liberal at that kind of interpretation. Which again, because of time, I got to stop. I could talk for another couple of hours very easily. So I want to leave you with a couple little things. One, when it comes to observing the world and all, I want you to realize we got 5 senses that we can do that with. We only experience 4.5% of the universe right now because as physicists and astronomers are putting together, there is 95.5% of the universe that we seem like we're being able to measure, but we have no idea what it is. Unknown energy, unknown matter, commonly called dark energy, dark matter. It's really it's dark because it's unknown. So be aware that there's a whole lot more around you that you can make yourself sensitive to. So my whole sermon talk here is that I wish for you to be creative, not just in art, but in the way you live your life. In the way you look at your life, the more creative you are, the more in harmony you can be with that universal love that's out here. we'll leave you with Einstein one more time. I like this because it's a dichotomy. It's very eloquently poetic. The eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. Thank you.